It's time for an Out and About with Jamie Grout Shortcast video, and with me is Melissa Strovers with Powesheik Economic Collaborative, and I can pronounce that correctly. I had a little trouble with the podcast starting out with that, but Melissa said, you know, if you could just get the name out okay, I can kind of explain what it's all about. So take it away, Melissa.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your organization.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. So the Powesheik Economic Development Collaborative is our name. Among friends, we call it Powesheik Development because we recognize that it is a mouthful. You may know of the organization under its previous name of Powesheik. In the spring of last year, we went through and did a rebranding and marketing exercise that was really born out of Powesheik Development Strategic Plan. We interviewed and surveyed over 100 businesses through our strategic planning process. We heard from 50 from across the county, which I think is a great response rate. And what we heard over and over was this need for a connected, collaborative effort. Our communities working together across the county to support economic development. So the name Powesheik Economic Development Collaborative is where that came from. That collaborative piece is really important because working together will make us all stronger as a region.
And you said during the podcast that effort has really helped to make a lot of progress. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so what I mentioned to you is this past fall we launched 6 different work groups, again, born out of the strategic plan in the areas of tourism, workforce, housing, large business, industry and manufacturing, entrepreneurs, and small businesses. And each of those work groups is comprised of community leaders from across the county. And each of the groups is working on specific goals that they have identified as top priorities in across the county. And you know, Jamie, it's really just about bringing people together to share ideas and hear what's working in your community, how that might work in our community, to really work together to align the resources to raise up economic development efforts across the county. So one of the things that we heard, right, is there are so many great things that are going on in Powesheik County, so many wonderful events. Well, how do you in a community know what's going on? You know, we have, Chamber of Commerce's amazing things. And so just this thinking of how do we though get the word from other communities? And so how do we work together? How do we think about this? So one of the things that, I think has been accomplished through these work groups is having some discussions that maybe wouldn't have otherwise been had in terms of workforce. There's a lot of discussion. You mentioned, how do you support current workforce needs? Well, that is an area that's been identified across the state. And so when you think about that, we need to think about, the future workers and what that looks like. Well, it's great when you have on your workforce committee someone who is a principal at one of the high schools and thinking about how do we survey high school students to see what their interests are, so that perhaps they might stay here when they graduate, and how do we do that and what does that look like, and just making sure that you have the right people around the table at the right time to move projects forward. And that's what we're seeing, is that there's a lot of wonderful discussion among community leaders from across Powesheik County.
When you talk to people who are interested in moving their manufacturing company or business to Grinnell or Powesheik County, what are some of the selling points that you tell them about?
Yeah, I mean, so you have to keep in mind, right, it depends on the type of business, right? Whether it's a small, medium, large, or a startup business. As a transplant from California, I've lived here now 20 years. Moved here for a quality of life. So, quality of life is something that's really important for business recruitment, and attraction is one of those key things, because you've got to have your employees want to come and live here, right? And people can recognize that. I also say that, we are really centrally located right off I-80, nice, easy access to Des Moines and Iowa City from the east to the west. We're also uniquely situated between 2 major airports located here. We're also home to Grinnell College, and we're only an hour 15 from University of Iowa and from Iowa State. So you really can't get in a much better location as we are here in Powesheik County.
Well, in terms of economic development, I know you have a new business that's starting in downtown Grinnell. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk about this nonprofit organization that's going to be taking up a storefront here in Grinnell. Again, I mentioned to you in the podcast that last year the Iowa Economic Development Authority came to Grinnell, Brooklyn, and Montezuma to conduct downtown assessments for each of those communities. For the downtown assessment in Grinnell, there were many things that were identified, beautification projects and so forth. We have a beautiful downtown, and there are always, things that you can do and ways that we can work together to do things like alleyscapes and that kind of thing. So out of this idea for the downtown assessment came this idea of having a new thrift store in downtown Grinnell. And what's unique about this particular thrift store is that this nonprofit organization called Prairie Thrift is actually going to be donating the net proceeds back into the downtown area for things like I mentioned, like streetscapes and all sorts of kinds of projects to help ensure we have a thriving downtown. And work with community partners. I think that's essential when we're talking about economic development. It's important to remember that, it really is a collaborative effort. I go back to the name, Jamie, and bringing in all those partners, because it's not one single group, but it's all of us working together. We're going to be able to support the region. So Prairie Thrift is opening this Saturday, April the 25th, 10 a.m. So hope you can make it, Jamie.
I'll do the best I can. Okay. I'm hoping to do a podcast with them. They said contact us in June because they want to be able to get everything taken care of, and they probably have a few loose ends that they got to get tied up and everything. But I'm going to try to have a podcast with them then, but I'll try to make it to that. If people want to reach out to you, and I'm sure you're answering questions all the time about things going on in Grinnell and how they might fit into the picture here in terms of businesses, how can they do that, Melissa?
Yeah, so again, as I said in the podcast, if you're looking to start a business, whether it be in Grinnell or Brooklyn or Montezuma, and looking for some additional information, consider me your connector, right? I work with the local communities. I have access to resources and can direct you to those kinds of resources. People can reach me two ways. You can email me at director@powesheikdevelopment.com, or you can call me on my phone at 641-260-1625.
All right. Melissa, thank you very much for taking the time to join me today. That is Melissa Strovers, the Executive Director of Powesheik Economic Collaborative. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Out and About with Jamie Grout's Shortcast video. And you can always catch that on my YouTube channel and on outandaboutwithjamiegrout.com. Till next time, Grout is out. See ya.